Usually I don't do movies that often, but today is the 20th anniversary of Shrek 2, 2 decades old, and it's surprising that this film is finally 20 years old, which really improved the popularity of DreamWorks at the time. So, for me personally, reviewing this movie right now is the perfect time to discuss what I feel about the film, considering that I've come back to it from time to time. I want to make it clear that I'm not one of those big Shrek fans who praise this film as one of the best things ever, especially when it came to Schaefer's Productions video centering around this film back in October of 2018. I do like this film, and I agree it's one of the best sequels, but at the same time, I'm not a huge diehard Shrek fan as everyone else in the franchise. I just view this film as how it made a huge impact of DreamWorks animation when it comes to this film being the first CGI film after dropping the whole 2D animation aside. Keep in mind, aside from Ants and the first Shrek movie, this was the first film that kickstarted the 3D animation direction after they gave up on 2D animation, with Sinbad being the last of the 2D animated films. But then again, after rewatching this film multiple times, it really shows that DreamWorks were at the peak when it comes to going through this style of the humor that we are familiar with, and how it made a huge influence on other films, for better or worse. But still, after 2 decades, I still enjoy this film upon rewatch. If I ever had the choice to pick which film I want to start off with when it comes to the Shrek franchise, it would definitely be this film. Sometimes it's difficult for people who make films when it comes to sequels, don't take inspiration from Shrek 2 by doing something different, by having the characters be explored more and having more lore to the universe. Because when the first Shrek movie came out, the lore wasn't fully explored aside from Shrek's swamp and Lord Farquaad's place. So when it came to this film, I was really impressed on the fact that there was a lot more going on when it comes to Far Far Away and Fairy Godmother's Potion Factory. Especially when it leads to awkward moments and action-packed sequences. Mainly the arrival of Shrek and Fiona in Far Far Away at Fiona's parents' castle, which leads to everyone being shocked that Fiona is being married to an ogre, not to mention that she's an ogre due to Shrek breaking the spell differently. All the while the Prince Charming wanted to kiss Fiona in order to break the spell, which is what Harold wanted all along. Especially including the awkward dinner scene, which I found enjoyable and relatable in the point of view of King Harold and Shrek. And the fact that people have been doing this scene so many times that it's becoming a cult classic of this moment of people remembering the awkward moments and the humor along the way, even though that it's difficult to laugh at most of the humor after watching this film multiple times. If it's mostly on me on watching the film multiple times while others watch this film once in a while, I was really into Shrek when I was a kid. Believe me, I've rewatched so many films as a kid to the point that when I get bored out of them, I get back to them in about several months or so. The plot of this movie centers around Shrek trying to make things right for Fiona and her family, since he married to Fiona as he's part of the family. But at the same time, he learns that he's not the one who's supposed to rescue Fiona, with further detail that Fiona wants to be with a handsome man that isn't like Shrek. And considering that the first movie indicated that Fiona didn't want it to be around with Shrek, considering that he was ugly, which led to her reconsider by acting him out, which really mattered to Shrek, really shows that he can't be able to change, all the while still having feelings towards people who respect him personally. To tell you the truth, when I see more analysis videos centering around Shrek from the first movie and in this movie, it's really difficult to not be relatable towards Shrek, knowing full well that he went through so much from the first movie, and when it comes to this movie, it's a huge obstacle that he can't be able to overcome, but that's not the point. It was in luck that he rescued Fiona first, while Prince Charming was too late, even though it was all part of Lord Farquaad's plan on marrying someone in order to be king. To tell you the truth, considering that the new cast of characters in this film are highly different than the characters who appear once, which was from the first film, there's a huge transition when it comes to the first film and the second film. Mainly the fact that the animation has a bigger upgrade after 3 years of improvement on technology. And to tell you the truth, just by watching this movie alone, you can tell that you can watch this movie without witnessing the plot from the last movie to not catch up on the details. Especially on the fact that Lord Farquaad is out of Fairy Godmother's level, or lead in this case, because there's a reason onto why people say that Fairy Godmother is one of the best villains of the Shrek franchise. And even though I'm familiar with the whole villains of the Shrek movies having a motive of gaining a higher power, which for me personally it's a lot more noticeable, but at the same time, Fairy Godmother is a lot more powerful, even more powerful than Rumpelstiltskin from the fourth Shrek movie. Every time that she tries to do something manipulative and she is really ruthless behind Fiona's back, goes to show that she can instantly take power into her own hands, which for me personally, when you have a villain that has that motive, it really makes them really unstoppable and really threatening to take down. To tell you the truth, considering that Shrek never stopped the Fairy Godmother, and he's fully aware that she'll stop at nothing to have Prince Charming, who is her son, to marry Fiona by using a potion that she gave to Harold, really goes to show that she is that unhinged but also menacing in order to get what she wants. Every time that these characters do these elements of doing the right thing, all the while doing the wrong thing, all the while the main character needs to make things right for not only for himself but also for Fiona and her family, makes his sympathy a lot more noticeable, because as far as I'm concerned, judging of how that Fairy Godmother stated that all girls don't live happily ever after, just proves that her manipulation will stop at nothing to put Shrek down by any means necessary. As far as I'm concerned, every time that whenever I see Shrek on screen while trying to handle the changes that he went through from the ending of the last film, all the while you have characters like Fairy Godmother and Prince Charming doing what they can in order to have a higher power, sometimes the following film, even though it's a bad film of the franchise, I can't get over the fact that Prince Charming was still trying to prove a point that he wants his happily ever after than Shrek. Though then again, I take characters seriously when people don't take them seriously that much. So speaking of characters that are meant to be taken seriously, aside from comic relief, Puss in Boots makes his first appearance in the Shrek franchise from this movie alone. Well, he was originally a hitman, only to be part of Shrek's side. I'm gonna be really honest with you that watching Puss in Boots in these movies shows that there was little for him to work with, which leads to the spin-off films centering around him having a different narrative, to the point that the second movie centering around him ended up becoming one of DreamWorks' best films in recent time. But I'm not gonna lie, he still makes a great impression in this movie, and the fact that he does the eyes things that you were all familiar with. I'm gonna be real with you that when a character appears for the first time, when they're written good, they make a good impression. So I really felt like that, aside from his sequel of his spin-off films, I say that Shrek 2 is the second best to handle Puss in Boots in the franchise. And to be real, if I actually wanted him to drink the potion, then his presence in the film wouldn't be much impactful, considering that what ends up happening in the following film, where he switched bodies with Donkey, not really a good joke due to poor execution. Now let's talk about the soundtrack that people have been talking about from this movie and the last movie. I liked nearly every single one of them, and I can honestly tell that with it being the major factor with these Shrek movies, it really shows that the following movies have this gimmick of having multiple artists being part of it to make the movie a lot more better, which includes Shark Tale, which came out after this film, but at the same time, it did everything the complete opposite of Shrek 2. Every time I listen to these songs, they're difficult to ignore, especially of how they're perfectly executed when it comes to holding out for a hero that was sung by the actress who played Fairy Godmother, even though I prefer the original. I really felt like that every time that these songs have been executed in these movies when it comes to the style of Shrek, it kind of shows that this influence of Shrek really continued on with DreamWorks' category, which for me personally, it could be either a good thing or a bad thing, unless if you look into the future films after Shrek 2 in their own way, despite with the similarities that they have of the Shrek films. Granted, I understand that in some cases it can be annoying when it came to the movies taking influences from the Shrek films, mainly 1 and 2, but at the same time, the third Shrek movie were placing songs in bad timing and do not fit the narrative of the setting of Shrek 3. With my experiences of watching this film as I got older and older, the more I understand that this is one of the greatest sequels ever made, for how it improves on the characters, improve on the writing, not to mention that it has one of the best moments, even better than the last film. And it's really impressive and unbelievable to think that this film is officially 20 years old. Like, back in 2018 while I watched Shape Ferris's video of it, I really didn't care about its age, considering that it was reaching its 15th anniversary in 2019. But since, well, in 2024, well, it's officially 20 years old, it's still amazing that more and more people are tuning into this film after watching the first film for the first time. I've seen more and more people on YouTube that are getting into these films since that they haven't seen them before. Really shows that the entire planet that we're living in has more people than you think. Even though I didn't get into all the details of what makes this film a good sequel, but at the same time, I'm not Shape Ferris, and I'm not one of those diehard Shrek fans. In my perspective, I found this movie good as it is, even though that it's a good sequel towards the first film. My review of this film is just to celebrate its 20th anniversary. In all honesty, if I was going to save this review for a later time, mainly Summerpalooza 5, if I celebrate the season differently, then it will probably be a lot more off, considering that I have to review the first film to be a little coherent when it comes to getting into the second film. I'm just saying this right now, there is a chance I might talk about the first film, but at the same time, my plans are really low on that. I'm just reviewing the second movie to celebrate its 20th anniversary. Not to mention that I'm a cartoon reviewer and not much of a movie reviewer, because this video was difficult to put together, but I knew I need to review it for its 20th anniversary. I'm giving Shrek 2 an 8 out of 10.